Good afternoon. There's an expression I learned just a couple days ago that the happy ending to the story depends on when you stop telling the story. So I hope I can find the happy ending in what I'm going to tell you. The Pearl incident happened in 1848 at a time where, as described earlier, there was a lot of tension between the abolitionist community and the slaveholding community. The Snow riots had just been 13 years earlier, then that Turner Rebellion about 4 years before that, and the Congress was dominated by slavery interests who wanted to spread slavery into the new territories out west. But on the other hand, there was the abolitionist movement that was trying to end slavery in the United States, and there was a particular subset of that at least was trying to end the slave trade in the nation's capital, because they thought that was particularly unseemly. In that backdrop, in Washington, there were a number of free black people who, as a matter of fact, as many as 2/3 of the black population in Washington was free. However, the slaves in Washington, if people married to slaves, their slaves and their children were also slaves. And in this was a person by the name of Daniel Bell. His wife Mary and their 6 children were held by a slaveholder who had a provision in his will that they would be free at some point after his death. However, when their slaveholder died in 1848, his wife contested the will. Losing Mary Bell and their 6 children would have wiped out the value of her estate and provided her with a loss of income. So Daniel Bell and Mary Bell fought this, but litigation is expensive and the outcome is uncertain, and ultimately they did lose in court, and the court ruled that the manumission of the Bell family was to be rescinded, and the widow was given the right to sell the family elsewhere. So it was because of this that Daniel Bell sought out the abolitionist community to escape. And through those negotiations, they contracted to get on the Pearl and sail to freedom with a captain who had done this before. And in the negotiations to make this happen, Samuel Evanson, whose family is a member of Asbury, learned of this and also wanted to go along. And he brought along 2 of his sisters, Mary and Emily, and 3 of their brothers. And as the word spread that this escape was going to happen, the captain, who had done this before, thought it would be perfectly fine to accept all who were willing to come on the designated day, April 14th. So on the designated day, anybody who got there by midnight was free to join them and sail away. So 77 slaves came to the site, and the intention was to sail down the Potomac to the Chesapeake Bay, and then from there go to New Jersey. But when they reached the point of the turnaround at, I believe it was Mount Pleasant, yes?
Closer to the mic.
When they reached the point of the turnaround, they ran into high winds and storms and chose to dock and to wait out the storm rather than to take the risk of going into the open sea and being lost. Back in Washington, though, when it was noticed...
The mic is out. It's going in and out.
He's working on it.
He's working, okay.
Back in Washington, when it was noticed that all these slaves were missing, a posse was formed, and a cab driver who had taken 2 of the slaves to the escape let it slip that they escaped by sea. So the posse took a steamboat, followed down the Potomac, captured the Pearl, towed it back to Washington. The escapees were then sold to slave traders from Louisiana and from Georgia who were going to send them all back down to the Deep South. Mary and Emily Evanson, who were young and attractive, were targeted to be sold to a brothel in New Orleans. And because they were young and attractive, they commanded a higher than average price. So their father, Paul Edmondson, worked with the abolitionist community in Washington to try to raise their price to free his daughters from this fate. And he appealed to the Asbury community, and he traveled to New York, and money was raised in New York from Plymouth Congregational Church, which was led by Henry Ward Beecher. And they raised $2,000 and secured the freedom of Mary and Emily. Fortunately, their brother Samuel was also freed because previously they had a brother, Hamilton, who had escaped years earlier, who unfortunately had been caught, who had been sold down south, but secured his freedom, and he was living as a free man in Louisiana. So he sought out his brother Samuel, raised the funds to secure Samuel's freedom, and he also raised the funds to secure the freedom of two other brothers who were on the parole, Ephraim and John. So that's the closest I can come to my happy ending. Following the parole, that tension between the abolitionists and the slave advocates continued into the Compromise of 1850, where the goal of ending the slave trade in Washington was accomplished. However, the Compromise of 1850, also part of that was the Fugitive Slave Act, which allowed slave catchers to go into the territories and capture any slave who had left enslavement, which meant that thereafter the Underground Railroad had to work to get people out of the United States entirely to be sure that they were free. And also, after Mary and Emily were free, they became advocates for abolition. They were educated in Oberlin College. Mary died young. Emily lived to age 60. Okay. And there's more, there's a lot more, but this is, it was great to learn this, and it's great for me to be able to share it with you.